On the journey of youth, Lilith and her friends grow together, face challenges, and pursue dreams. This is a story about friendship, love, and self-discovery. Don't miss this magical chapter about growth. Chapter 16. After kicking me out for nearly an hour so they could discuss amongst themselves because I, obviously, have nothing better to be doing. I got a glare when I was pulled back in by the fire elite because I had taken the long, forced, wait to read, but he didn't directly insult me. Just gave that disgusted look he seems to always have when looking at me. So, nothing different there. Regardless of the issues he has with that misfortune of a face of his, they asked more about my potion, but I shut down all questions about the recipe before they could even get the rest of it off their lips. Oh, I'm sorry, did you not know I'm the daughter of a merchant? Well, that's a new fact for you, and also why would I ever give information I could make money off away for free? No? Just no. I don't care if I'm afraid of that lot. Money is money and I will die for it. Willingly. Anyway, they took all of the remaining potions, except one that they claim I can use for comparison, because they clearly understand potion making. Having been shut down for the recipe, I was encouraged, urged aggressive, to make more for them. The dean even used it as an excuse to actually give me the key he was supposed to give me well over 3 weeks ago. Upon seeing this, Miss H gave a mighty glare that promised a later argument. Ushering me out of the room, she properly encouraged my potion making, without any greedy undertones, and even let me keep all my books and notebooks. Which was amazing. I was not going to be able to make this without those. Which leaves us here, with me in front of a mirror, having finished everything for the day and still not seen the damage of yesterday's fiasco. I had been far too busy with makeup classes to so much as look at myself. And I couldn't seem to make a mirror to save my life. I tried. A lot. Leaning to the side gently, I held my cheek and ran my finger over the pinkish-whitish mix of skin along the side of my face. Did I turn my head or something? I had expected more. Though, my ear did look wonky, and it did run along the side of my head more than my face. Maybe 2 inches, 2.5 inches, along the entire right side of my face. It stretched to my eye, thankfully that was working just fine, other than missing half my eyebrow, but it really hadn't been as bad as I thought it would have been. Leaning back, I touched the mirror and looked over my torso, my hair brushed over my other shoulder. It wasn't very prominent on my neck, but enough so that you didn't have to look twice to find it. Running my fingers along the curve of my shoulder, I tapped it lightly with my forefinger and middle finger. It drew past my collarbones to nearly half my right chest. It pulled down just below the hip. Turning, I looked over my bony shoulder and pulled my hair in front of me. It wrapped around the back of my head to maybe 3 inches before half, my scalp showing with the pink-white dips of my skin, which was quite curious and truly telling me I had turned my head before the blast. Just as aggressively as the front, it reached 1/4 of the way across my back, halfway to my slightly visible spine, fading the further it got away. Raising my arm, which had the worst of it, I slowly ran my fingers down my side. It wasn't that much lighter than my arm. Narrowing my brown eyes, I went through the effort of actually inspecting my arm. With how horribly burned it is, I'm quite shocked at how effortless it is to move. Though a little tight, it really does feel as if nothing had happened. He had mentioned surgery. Did he sever the melted skin? I thought as I looked between my fingers. The skin was certainly more scarred around my fingers, wrist, and elbow. Even just under my arm looked as if it had a little assistance. Opening and closing my hand, I rolled my wrist and hummed. That's impressive. Looking at my nails, I frowned lightly at the slight curve and murkiness of them, having me think about maybe bothering to paint them. Rolling my eyes at the effort, I ruffled my hair and began to dress myself. I understand why he laughed now. It wasn't my face nor the new scars. It was my hair. A large portion had been burned and was missing, and a lot was simply singed. I would laugh too had I seen that walking with the council. At the thought, I looked in the mirror once more. My hair hadn't been extremely long, simply below my chest, but now I was missing most of the right side, and it was not evenly singed. Glancing at my dragon, who was watching me curiously, I hummed and shrugged. It was getting in the way anyway. Long hair wasn't something that went along well with war. Warmth ran down my arm, as a pin brushed against my fingers, and I was quickly parting the top off. Working gently around the patched hair within my burned scalp to get at least a half-decent line. Mother would kill me if I just lopped it all off after all. Humming, I tied it up and started to cut away at the mess that was left down, practically cutting it to my scalp, attempting to level with what was missing. I pulled the ribbon holding the rest of it free and got to work on that, though not nearly as short. I cut it to just below my jaw. Tossing the scissors at the dragon, I didn't even bother looking, as the sound of it shattering was enough for me. Throwing my uniform aside, having just dirted it, I brushed off the invasive hair. Quickly pulling on a different uniform, and I ruffled my hair over the mop on the floor as I grabbed my bag, pulling my many crystals around my neck, and paused before I went to leave, catching a glimpse of myself in the mirror. Staring at the mirror, my skill better than I remember it ever being, I pulled on one of my curls. It stretched and stretched while I just stared. The top puffed up, but swept to the side with minimal effort, the sides and back shorter while the top was long enough to brush just below the jaw. Letting go, it bounced back into place, my hair no longer matching my face. Though, it hadn't really ever done so. Maybe this was for the better. Humming, I re-ruffled the part of my hair that was hiding what I had done to my face and head before tying back what would only get in the way. "We are leaving," I called, jerking the door open and slamming it behind us. We began our way to the potion room, which I quickly discovered was closer than that closet they call my class study room. All it had in it was about 10 how-to guides and a set of lockpicks that I actually just carry around at this point. Class study is always so fun. I bet you can imagine just how great a study it is. However, it wasn't like I didn't understand. I was the only rogue in the entire school, so they probably just whipped it up as fast as possible, which left it bare, and with only the basics. So, while everyone else gets their in-depth lessons on just what they are suited for, I get a child's book. I'm sure you are starting to understand why I dislike this place beyond the blatant cruelty they claim to be learning. That, and despite my attempts to either buy new or find my old boots, I have been forced to walk around barefoot for the majority of my schooling here. The teachers didn't even dress code me anymore. I'm positive they had better ways to go about it, but by the fact they haven't changed it, this is either faster, easier for them, or the cheapest option. Or, my current number one, this tactic also works as a form of brainwashing. Breaking down their dreams until there's nothing left but orders and preventing future rebellion. If that one is true, then ethics and morals are to be crushed before we ever get to the battlefield. Which means, they are doing risky things that need the brainwashing of children. A model soldier is, after all, a young and moldable mind, especially one wiped of hope. But, well, even I wouldn't say that out loud. Much like how I keep my draconic golem ideas to myself. People have certainly thought of it before, but no one has brought it to attention, or maybe they haven't. Unfortunate things unfolded. Twisting a lock of my hair around my finger, I looked to my dragon, who gave a small shrill. Smiling softly, I ruffled the smooth glass of its head. Yes, I'm sorry, I'm being a downer, aren't I? I shouldn't let my sour mood bother the both of us. I hummed before taking a breath and straightening myself. With was a third year and above room. I was a first year. I had to expect the unexpected. Or cower in a corner. Or cower in a corner. That sounded a lot more fun. I'm doing that. Giving the beast a pointed look, it sat down and stuck its tongue out like a dog. Nodding, I silently unlocked and opened the door. Closing it just as quietly, I quickly moved to the back before any of them looked at me. Pressing my hand to the wall, I winced when the light glowed, but, thankfully, people minded their own business, and the dragon pranced out of the summoning circle thrilled. Giving a look, it huffed and laid down before it could cause trouble. Okay, you got this. Pulling out my notes, I skimmed them briefly, pulling out ingredients as I read them. Doing the failures in order, I dumped them in the moment they were done. With the execution of one that I had actually gotten right, and had to do again. Slowly stirring it, figuring that it rolling had done so, I side-eyed the large orb as it bubbled, the colors mixing to a deep and disgusting green. Raising the mixing stick, I watched as a drop hit the table and sparked. Leaning in with a raised brow, surprised I had got it right on the first try, it started to bubble again. And a big one popped right in my face, the air that rushed out leaving me to cough wildly, my hand slamming against the top and closing it quickly, my choking continuing as my eyes watered wildly. Don't breathe it in. I repeat, do not breathe it in. Scribbling this desperately in my notebook, I continued to cough, enough to draw attention to myself, and also enough to get the supervisor to walk over to ensure I was okay. I was not. At all. With a strained breath, I caught whatever it was in my throat and with a heavy and wet cough, got it all over my workstation. Gasping, finally able to breathe, I wiped my mouth and looked at just what I had coughed up. That's... my stars, that's a lot of blood. And just like that, the world went black. Chapter 17. Oh blazon. I jolted up, gasping and holding my chest, a face that is getting more and more familiar with each passing day, glared at me. Harder than usual. What did I do this time? Potions. Really? You aren't here enough, so, clearly, you've got to take up potions, as a first year might I add, because that's a smart idea, he scolded while I blinked in surprise. Oh? Oh? Oh no, do not look at me like that. Do you know how hard it is to heal someone with so much mana? Huh? Do you ever wonder why I'm the one that heals you? It's not my job to heal, I'm just supposed to be supervising the other healers, but then you have to show up. Ow, I love you too. I gushed in a baby's voice and moved to hug him, but he just roughly pushed on my face. So, what was wrong with me? I mean, I remember the coughing blood part, but I need to know for, like, warnings and stuff. I didn't bother moving his hand from my face, as I just left my arms limp by my sides. That wasn't blood, he deadpanned while I actually pulled away, my attention grabbed. That was pure, completely filtered, mana. You collapsed because your core was overstimulated and your body couldn't handle the amount of mana in your body, he said slowly, reading the report before ripping the page off and scribbling down something different. I didn't hear nor see anything, and I suggest you forget everything about this. Now then, due to your unstable amount of mana, you did undergo a burst. Thankfully, with your dragon nearby and taking the brunt of it, the damage was limited and one's shield was strong enough to prevent injury. Now, get out. The poor sap that got dragged into bringing your practically dead body to me hasn't left, so, he waved his hand at the door, telling me to shoo and giving me the original paper. Taking it, I nodded, deciding against saying anything, and got to my feet. Glancing at him, I shoved the paper in my bag, as I pulled it from the hook it was usually on. That's dangerous. Increasing one's mana to instability. Had I not been a glass mage that couldn't be brushed off? The human body, though not the most suited to magic, was well adapted to it and one of the most balanced in terms of what it could withstand. Drastically increasing one's mana. That's like making a living explosive. And, apparently, with quite a bit of recoil. I shouldn't look into it. I shouldn't even mention it. It'd be best to forget it, like he said. Opening the door, I came face to face with a very large half-orc. One I knew. One that usually beats me into the ground, then apologizes and helps me up. And Dre. I hoped he'd guide me, but he did not. So, I just got the poorly said half-finished name that honestly stemmed from a lazy dro. Alex, he said, realizing what I had tried to do and leaving us in awkward silence. Oh, Lilith, I put my hand to my chest. I know, damn, that doesn't make me feel any better for forgetting your name. Worse actually. Are you all right? I was startled when the fourth-year instructor asked me to take you to the infirmary. He scratched the back of his neck while leaning forward, trying not to make me feel as small as I do. Well, I am for the most part. Now, Doc says I was in bad shape but... Glancing back inside I found him making the, "I'm watching you" gesture, and immediately stepped in front of the window to his door. He tends to exaggerate. I do not. You should have died 5 times already. Ignore him. Now then, what is it you were doing around the potions room? I asked, steering him away from the door, as he looked between me and it. The screaming mostly. He tried a smile while I curled my lips into my mouth and nodded to myself. That's a good, yeah, that's a pretty good reason, I sighed, rubbing my face, not remembering anything after the hacking up blood or, well, manna. My dragon. Just as the thought slid through the back of my mind, the floor was lighting up with the circle and the dragon was popping up like nothing was wrong. It then rubbed into my chest with a purr. My chest. It's bigger. Dragon's hit, I said in disbelief, my acknowledgement of the orc disappearing as I circled the dragon in awe. Look at you. You've gotten bigger. Such beauty. Such grace. You're gorgeous. I couldn't help but squeal. Huffing out its chest, it took a prideful pose. With wild struggling I was pulling myself onto its back while the orc carefully approached. You've got to have gotten faster. I could feel my eyes sparkle as I looked down at the poor fool that had gotten wrapped up in me. And stronger. Wait, magic or not, a dragon is still a dragon. He shouted as I dragged him up, with the help of its tail wrapping around his waist and forcing him atop its back. To the potion room. Wait. Laughing wildly as it lunged forward, the boy behind me desperately clinging to me, I easily held the smooth dragon, who was slipping and sliding down the halls. Actually slamming into a few walls. People making way at the sight of the dragon and the two on it. Shockingly, the dragon didn't waver despite the both of us, but I did notice how it didn't so much as manifest its wings. Which meant we were heavy. Considering the orc clinging to me, as if his life depended on it, was nearly 3 times my size, I'd have to say that is understandable. It also had me wondering if it could fly with just me. So many questions, so little time. Grunting as we rounded a corner, and slammed straight into a wall, I left to try and fix myself, but was quickly hurled into the lockers, the dragon having slid past the potion room, and corrected via bashing the 3 of us into the wall. Hopping off, I pulled at my blouse and ran my hand through my hair. Briefly glancing at my hand, I unlocked the door without a glance to the boy on all 4s gasping for breath, and mumbling, "I'm going to throw up." Humming, I looked around the mostly cleaned room, for what I knew would have to be here. My eyes settled on the large orb that was no longer green. Blinking in surprise, I pulled my notebook from my bag and scribbled the change of colors before walking over to the now vibrant purple. Pausing to grab it, the explosion leaking into my mind, I held my chin and stared at it. I have a feeling I would totally drop it again. Narrowing my eyes, desperation growing on my curiosity before a torch went off in my head. Putting both hands on it, I rolled the orb into 2 before continuing until I had 24 orbs barely the size of my palm. All right, that should be fine. How am I going to carry them? Oh, you utter idiot. Now what? Put them in your bag. Risk blowing up your saving grace. Ignoring the insult I directed at myself, I looked around the room. This was a place for potions, they had to have something to carry them. Grinning as I found just what I wanted, I scrambled over to it, and quickly started to pack the many orbs in the leather case. The layers reminding me of what we keep our eggs in, but fancier. Hooking the bag over my shoulder with my other, I whistled on my way out, grinning like a fool. Excited that I get to play with potions and call it work. I raised a brow at the orc who had sat up and was leaning against the lockers while I locked the room. Rough day. I immediately got a glare, but just snorted. Oh, I just spiced up your life a bit, you'll thank me in a few years. I ruffled his dark hair. Opening his mouth to say something, he shut it fast as I cancelled my summons, the dragon gone in a bright blue glow. See you in class. I threw over my shoulder with a wave, jogging to the field to conduct my tests. By the time I had got there, the sun had been down, but it didn't even take half a chant before the many crystals around my neck lit up. Spinning an orb on my finger, I scribbled in my notebook before catching it and tossing it as far as I could. Which wasn't far. My lip curled up in distaste while I looked away from the bright flash. Okay. So, after the color changes, it becomes more potent, to the point that the flames are mostly white and blue with a few licks of orange here and there. Picking up another, I tossed it in my free hand while I whistled to myself, still writing. I was going to have to find a way to block out that light. I couldn't really see what was going on with that flash it initially gives off. Sighing, I went to throw the one in my hand, but paused and groaned. This was all I was going to be able to get. Deciding not to waste any more, I put it in the case with the others and packed up my stuff. With these, I actually had a chance in the tournament. Which was great, because I've been putting off stressing about just how Dad would react if I screwed up. I mean, if I tarnished the Windsor legacy, I was definitely getting abandoned. There were already people looking down on us, because I had glass magic, and laughed when hearing that I was in Dragon Valley. These were just what I needed to prove that Windsor was still a stronghold before the king looked our way, and if I couldn't do that with magic, I damn well could with any and every other way to do just that. Magic be damned, it didn't matter anyway. Pausing, I blinked in surprise at just how right that was. This wasn't about magic. This was about whether or not I was getting booted from my house. This was about a noble's pride and nothing else. If I couldn't make them proud, I wasn't a Windsor. Magic doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be strong, there's no need to overpower others if you simply know how to properly use it. Work smarter, not harder. Brain over brawn. I sure as blazin' ain't brawn, so I might as well be brain. True magic was trash anyway, I'll just have to remind everyone just what magic means. Cause it isn't so shallow a meaning that one is ignored just for having been born with one kind over the other. Magic doesn't matter. Chapter 18. Well, she grinned and slapped my blade away. Aren't you spirited today? You usually slack off as much as possible. Sking as the so-called professor hooked my blade and forced it from my hand, sending it flying. I didn't dwell on it and kicked her in the chest. Sprinting to my blade, I snatched the sword from the ground with a roll, her having caught up and swinging for my head like that won't hurt even with dull blades. I couldn't get a single hit. Why couldn't I get a single hit? Grinding my teeth, I twisted around her incoming blade and swung for her back. Her elbow just pulled back sharply, slamming into my hand and forcing the blade out of my grip once more as I hissed, but caught it in my other hand. Without hesitation, I went straight up, targeting her arm. She, however, easily pulled her arm across her back, escaping the hit and moving in for a counter swiftly, firmly hitting me in the ribcage and forcing me back with a stumble. Pain rushed to what I'm sure was already a bruise, but I didn't get even a second to recover, her sword already crashing into my spine and forcing my front to find the filthy floor. Moving to push myself up, I grunted as my arms trembled and chest heaved, but before I could get to my feet she stomped on the hand wrapped around my short sword. Crying out, I couldn't help but release the blade, her own sword framing my neck. You've gotten unexpectedly good at this in only a week. Where was this passion last month? You could have easily been at the top of the class if you had this enthusiasm from the beginning. Glaring up at her, I didn't comment and rubbed my wrist. She wasn't a nice teacher. Not at all. She only gave tips before and after. She beat you between. She broke my arm yesterday. You can imagine how happy my personal healer was. Grumbling about the support who has been refusing to let me spar with those in my class because you expect to keep up with them. With your strength. Okay, yeah, sure, what are you going to do? Wow them with your skills. Mind you, she was laughing when she said that. Do you know much about daggers? I asked, changing the subject. She rested her sword on her shoulder and lazily twirled it while staring down at me. In general, or, like, how good am I with them? Why is that even a question? How good are you at using them? I grunted, pushing myself to my feet before rolling my wrist, my hand pulsing with a vengeance. And a boot print. Ah? Looking up, she raised her brows and whistled softly. I guess I'd be decent. I mean, the support school I went to wasn't nearly as demanding with being versatile, you just stuck with what you were good at. And I only had to pass that unit, so there wasn't ever a need to master it. She shrugged, hooking my blade with her boot and kicking up. Catching it with ease, she raised both brows at it. This is weighted. Why is this weighted? Fastest way to get stronger, I sighed, cracking my back with a moan. Already feeling the bruises and hearing the grief I was going to get. Whoa, wait. Are you telling me you did all that with a weighted sword? The entire period? She asked with a bewildered laugh. I just gave her a look, not in the mood to deal with whatever mocking she was about to do. I don't need your sarcasm today, it's demeaning enough that I couldn't hit you once. Her brows shot up, and her head shook slightly, her brows quickly knitting together, as an unbelieving smile pulled at her lips. No shit, I'm an instructor for a reason, you brat. Did you honestly think you would be able to strike me? I have a sword mastery, it's literally my forte. I've been to war, I kicked ass. Of course your scrawny self couldn't touch me, but that doesn't mean you aren't good. You're pulling things off that a seasoned warrior wouldn't even think of, and your idiotic self did all that with a weighted sword. Kid, I don't think you realize just what kind of dragon's hit that is. You've gotten that much better in a week. A damn week. That's not how that works. It's unrealistic without a weighted sword, but with it, I've got to say, you're as monstrous as they come. Wow. Thanks. That was just the confidence booster I needed. You pulled past those insults, then you had to go and say that. You have a shit personality, I deadpanned, her smug smile shifting to a grin. Don't I know it, now get up, class ain't over yet, she said, tossing me my sword while I grunted but caught it. An idea came to mind just as I glanced at my actual professor. I wonder, could I get her to bend the rules? I've actually got something I'd like to try. I tried while she looked up at me and raised a brow. You see, I haven't had the chance to try it in magic class yet, and there's no point if I can't use it in real combat, practice or otherwise, I offered with a hum while I twirled the blunt blade, having gotten used to her horrible personality, and just how to handle it. Not like you could actually touch me either way, do what you want, brat. With permission granted, I tossed the sword to the side. Clenching and unclenching my hands, I cracked my neck, warmth sliding down my veins, and two dull swords finding my hands. Oh, I so hope you know I'm shattering both your little toys, she grinned, tossing her blade from one hand to the other, shifting her weight with it. It was dull, but it was glass, and glass plus metal equals shattered. Especially considering she was actively going to attempt to break them. Good. That means I can get proper practice. Tucking one of my swords under my arm, I easily made a thick pair of tall spectacles. Sliding them on, I glanced at her, a cocky smile pulling at my lips, knowing just how dangerous broken glass was, all the while knowing the perfect way to rile her up. If you have any form of weakness, she'll instinctively go after it. This was glass on my face. That's a weakness if I've ever heard of one. With a nod, we gave the ready signals, and this time, I was the first to move. Lunging forward, I clenched my jaw with anticipation, knowing just what was to come, and as I thought, she blocked the obvious swing. My blade shattered in a second, her eyes lighting up at having already completed her goal, my stomach tightening as I didn't stop my arm, the blade reforming rapidly just as it got past her sword. Her eyes sharpened as she quickly swung back her head and avoided it, but barely, the weight in my other hand being swiftly jerked up. She shattered it with a block, spraying glass everywhere while I didn't bother to fix it, and just let it go, the one in my other hand flying at her face. One or the other. She wasn't good with both. Her foot, however, didn't agree with me as it shot up and hit me in my throbbing wrist. Hissing, I let go and swung the sword that was fast to form in my other hand. She jumped back with ease while I scared. Too short. The end grew before the thought had finished. Advancing, I shifted my swing from knee to shoulder in hope of getting under her blade, but it didn't take more than a twist of her arm for it to shatter. Then the reforming remains before it could mend. Her sword ramming into the side of my neck in less than a second. Crying out with a cough, I leaped back and grabbed it. It wasn't hard enough to do anything more than bruise, but that alone meant she could have stopped. But no. She just had to get my glasses off. You know, I think I've figured out something extremely unpleasant about you, she said, looking at her blade, her eyes sharp and sadistic sarcasm missing. I don't think I could win in a real fight with you, brat. If you were going for the kill, I doubt you'd be out in the front. You're most definitely a distance fighter, probably good with a bow. Licking her lips, she pulled in her bottom one before looking at me with an unfamiliar cold gaze. Plus, you've got gold between your ears and you're fast, and you're keen, annoyingly so, you pick up on the most irritating of things. Don't even get me started on that magic. Sure, it's as weak gets, but you call it quick. Like it's second nature. You're the worst kinda enemy to find on a battlefield. Sure, you ain't the typical lead that's out front barking like some dog, but you're definitely a lead. A really irritating one. That's quite the compliment, but I'm gonna have to call your bluff. I'm as fragile as it gets, I can't win. Even in practice. I sighed, rubbing my neck and falling to my back, my gaze wandering to the fallen glasses beside me. You ever notice how the word fragile's got agile written into it? Chapter 19. After her little confidence boost, Isabel's training was suddenly 10 times harsher. Which is saying something. It was to the point that my personal healer, James, actually started to come to the field for swordsmanship. He mostly just sleeps, but with my bones being broken mercilessly, and the tearing of flesh I didn't know dull swords could cause, often cut his nap time short. With every heal, I had a new scar, some smaller and others larger. Did you know that was possible? Skin tearing not from the sharpness of a sword, but the brute force of the blade. Isn't that a fun fact? Now, I may have been a little less caring for the brutality of it all if it was just that class. But no. Miss H's worries bled beyond that little demonstration in my archery class. I was being forced to do more and more distance shooting, and it was murdering my arms. You read that right. Arms? I had to practice both arms. Again, it could be forgiven if it was just those two. However, with every class, I had one or another person pushing me beyond my limit, and times that by 10. Be it the fire elite that I pissed off by existing, or the dean who was shockingly obedient when Miss H tried to help me. He, though, took the word help and decided it meant torture, so, you know, that's fun. Physical classes seem to never end. The moment I get even near the goal forced on me, it's moved twice as far. The academic classes coming one after the other with no rest or buffer. Test after test, book after book. No spare time. You sleep or studied, bathed and ate if you were lucky. You met what was expected of you, or you were getting booted out of school. That was it. And someone was disturbing my sleep. Groaning, I curled into the large smooth dragon halfway on my bed. I don't want to get up. Whining as the knocking just got louder, I burrowed my face into the dragon, happily doing nothing. I haven't had the time to be around it, and with its growing size, which currently exceeds the size of a horse, it couldn't follow me around, as it had been before. So I just let it run free in the woods. Though, not long after my gaining entrance to the potions room, I did learn something about this dragon of mine. It could be truly transparent if it so pleased, and I know what you're thinking. However, did you find out just a curious thing? Well, you see, I was going to leave it in my room as I had been doing, but the little beastly followed after me. I did not know this fact until later that day, when I had come back to my room to find it not there. After searching the school foolishly, I returned to my room and summoned the damned thing. The circle showed as usual, but not that dragon. In the midst of my heart attack, it had the gall to shrill at me as if I was playing with it. So, that's the story of learning it was fully capable of following me around without others knowing, which I allowed to continue until about 2 weeks ago, and now that you know that, I'm going back to sleep. Lilith, open the door or I break it in. Isabel shouted from the other side. Scowling, I rolled over and snuggled into my thin and wiry blanket, my broken bed shifting. The quiet skimming of claws on my wooden floor was nearly drowned out by the brutal beating of my door. Claws? I jolted upright a second before the door gave way and flew open, the bothersome person freezing at the sight of the dragon, who was standing before the door with a glowing throat and melted glass gliding down its mouth, which had teeth. Really long and very sharp teeth. Oh, you little. Knock it off. I snarled, throwing my hard pillow at the stupid beast, but it didn't look away from her. I said, knock it off. I growled with a glare. All I wanted was sleep. Was that too much to ask for? The dragon gave a soft and similar growl before turning and crawling back into bed, slamming its unnecessarily spiked tail into my desk, breaking it. Oh, I swear. The bloody thing was getting worse by the day. My baby was no longer the adorable little thing that listened without a word, and now it was practically rebelling. Sighing, I rubbed my face and turned my glare to the woman that was making my problem of a child so moody. It's Sunday, why are you here? I moaned, falling back to lean against the thing too big for my broken bed. Which it broke by being too big. Her eyes didn't look away from the dragon, who was glad to stare back. More than glad actually, as it curled its lips back to reveal its teeth, which it seemed to still have. What in the 7 circles is a dragon doing in your room? Did she not know? I thought everyone knew at this point. I mean, I wasn't exactly hiding it. I made it, I deadpanned with a flat look, throwing my arm over the neck of the beast, who put away a few of its spikes at the affection. Only those that I would touch though. Because this was a person. And persons are bad. I need to go back to bed. You made it, she repeated with a twitch of the brow and narrowed eyes. She was staring at me like I was some liar. I mean, I am, but not at this moment. I'm a whatever you call it. I waved with an eye roll, burrowing my back against the dragon in an attempt to get comfortable. A wing in the way of my comfort. Glancing back, while she did a whole lot of different facial expressions, I took hold of said wing and pried it off my bed. It, as well as the other, fell off without a word and shattered on my floor. Glass? Everywhere. Whatever. Whatever you call it. Why are you still here? Oh, what the blazon, my magic's unimans. I make living things know, nah. Get out of my room, I don't have to explain things to you. It's Sunday, I shot rolling into my dragon. The silence that followed made me think she left, but just as I was drifting back off, the illusion was shattered by someone I equally did not want to deal with. The one Sunday I had gotten off. The one damn day, and they all want to show up. I worked hard to avoid recovery classes all week, for what? This? Why are you in her room? Did the most bothersome people have a meeting and decide to come to my room and destroy my dreams? Literally. Lilith, why do you have so much glass? Everywhere. This time, with a very heavy sigh, I sat up and paid actual attention to my room. Okay, so, yeah, I did have a lot of glass in my room and it may have been quite literally everywhere but… who gives a shit? It's glass. It happens. Screw off. Makes me happy I asked my dad for that spatial trunk. I do not want to know what my books would look like had they suffered such a thing. Happens, I said flatly, rubbing my face again, but this time with both hands before I forced myself out of bed. And right onto some broken glass. With a sharp intake, I was sitting back down and held my foot. They opened their mouths to say something, probably stupid, but I put my hand up. Ripping out the glass, I just tossed it to the side in irritation. A mocking rumble ran through the still weaponized beast while I glanced back at it. You too, shut it. With that, I snapped my fingers and sent it off to the forest. With a long groan, sleep no longer a thing I'd be capable of, I ruffled what little hair I had left and got back to my feet. What are either of you doing here? A day off means sleep. Sleep I want, sleep I need, so, talk fast or get out of my fucking room. Wow, you sure are a dick when you're half asleep. Talk about character inconsistency. Suddenly, the glass on my walls grew very long and very sharp in a matter of seconds while I just stared at her in a way that made sure she knew that I did not appreciate her breathing. Well, maybe not. Before I could start something I knew I would both not be able to finish and fully regret. The fire elite opened his mouth. I had thought I was being considerate of your sleep. It is 4 p.m. I didn't think anyone would still be asleep at this time. Yeah, well, eat my shoe ass hat. I came to collect the promised potions. He cleared his throat of his condescending words upon the look that did not waver on my face. Did I do something like that? Would I really promise this potato sack something? Potions. Oh, sweet sugar plum, I whined, putting my face in my hands. The memory of the heavily encouraged and mildly threatening request for military-grade potions, after my go screw yourself answer when asked for the recipe briefly coming to mind. Good way to make coin. Bad way to make sleep, you know what. Whatever. Which one was it? I asked, scratching the rat's net on my head while I grabbed my bag. Carefully, as I did not want to step on more glass. I was already bleeding everywhere as is. Which? Are you telling me you've made a new one? Bite your tongue, you bitch, value your life, I swear. No, Sparky, I'm asking which order. What did I just say? Insulting an elite is not how you value your life. That's how you get killed. That is not the goal here. Mr. God Complex was especially sensitive, so at least pick the right one. I mean, if it really comes down to it, you do have more social standing, so it's not like it really matters. While I was rationalizing myself within, I held his gaze for a long while, him trying to tell if I really did make one, me bluffing the fact I did not. He did not need to know. No one needs to know until I decided it was safe and passed testing. Until then, everyone can screw off. 30 mediums, he grunted, backing off faster than I thought he would, while I stuck my arm into the bag looking for the case. Having found it, I pulled it free and without a single care in the world, tossed it at him. He stumbled to catch it with wide eyes, my dams all having flown away, as sleep was still very interesting. Are you insane? Probably. Now give me my gold and go away, I said with a tight smile, rolling my wrist and leaning against my recently broken desk, my foot really hurting. He tossed the coin purse just as carelessly and stomped off like a child. Rolling my eyes, I opened it and looked through it lazily. My eyes falling on the silent woman a moment later, causing me to jump upon remembering her existence. Why are you here? What was that? Don't go dodging my question with a question, that's not how this works. Which part? Him trying oh so desperately to be considered, or buying potions off a student? Don't answer the question, used to dodge your own. Grumbling, I rubbed my temples as they pounded and I sat on my bed, not having too much feeling in my fingers. The deal? I couldn't care less about the douche canoe playing polite. Okay, that's not quite right, but answer the first one first. Fine, whatever. The council buys potions off me and he's attempting, poorly, to be nice because I can raise my rates at any time, which would be the worst for them, because they have absolutely no chance at making them without me. Trust me. They've tried. We stared at each other in silence for a moment while she still did not leave. Okay, seriously, why are you here? You're like 30 and pretending we are BFFs despite breaking my bones daily. Okay, first, I'm never coming in here again without a black slush. Second, I'm 28. Third, I figured you could use some extra training. And finally, I will be breaking both your legs tomorrow. Can you take me to the healer before doing that? I asked with a sigh, not giving a shit at this point. I was getting dizzy and I can't feel my foot other than hot, so I'm taking that as a bad sign. I've got dots in my vision and, as I've learned, that's not good. Oh my stars, you are really a freak and a half, aren't you? Come here, I'll take you to fix your foot and maybe even whatever is going on in that head of yours. Don't get your hopes up, James has tried that one before. Many times as I'm told. Chapter 20. Glancing at the unknown man talking with the dean, I continued my way through the halls. I may not know all the teachers, but I did know how strict the dress code was, even for them, and that man definitely hadn't seen the handbook. Adrian's explanation of the best place to escape the librarian's keen eye during self-study, pausing upon noticing my drifting attention. Someone you know? He asked with a raised brow, looking at the slim, but seemingly fit man dressed in dark robes. And a cloak. Because that's inconsequence. No, but I've got the feeling I will soon enough, I mumbled, the dean pausing in his conversation to meet my gaze. A second later, the unknown man had soon followed his gaze right to me. I narrowed my eyes at the slanted, closed-eyed smile he gave and the matching wave before I looked away. Gods, why do I have to run into so many creeps? I shivered, the ominous feeling Vixen gave me crawling up my spine like a horde of spiders. Creeps? He seemed friendly, Adrian whistled, raising both brows and sliding his hands behind his head. Friendly? If he was friendly, do you think the dean would personally escort him? I asked, giving him a side eye that he matched. Just because someone is a person of power doesn't mean they can't be nice, he shot, dodging one of the many around us. Statistically, it does, I countered, slapping the facts in his face. You're a person of power, does that make you a bad person? He tried while I snorted. It doesn't make me one, but I am one, I mean, come on, you not only watched but joined me in my breaking the restricted section. I wiggled the restricted book in my hand. He stared for a moment before rolling his eyes. Teenage rebellion doesn't count. I'm 15, I'm fully aware of what I was and am doing, don't brush my actions into that of my age. I sighed dramatically, tucking the book back into my arms with the others I was holding. Aha, well, Miss Rulebreaker, your parents are also people of power, I faltered at that, almost getting dragged into the crowd at the brief stop in my steps. You're right, they are, and they love me. I know that quite well, however, because of the power our house holds. I have to be prepared for the chance I'll be tossed out if I can't get top marks, let alone stay in school, I said honestly, because they did love me, but traditional and noble was social suicide. Even if they were family. He didn't say anything, just tugged my arm, which kept me from running into an elf I wasn't paying attention to. Frowning, I watched the sicked elf, and apparently quite a few others rush past hollering about a dragon. My eyes widened at the word. I was immediately slapping his arm with my free hand, pushing my stuff into his hands, before racing after them. What did it do? Why was it around people? It hates people. Oh gods, what if it hurt someone? What if it killed someone? Sliding around the corner, with my heart in my throat, I found the hall far more crowded than normal, so much so that I was not going to be able to get through. Gritting my teeth, I looked around, finding the dean and his guest to the side, practically a shield around them as no one dared get close, but other than that, there wasn't any space to get through. Oh blazin' no. I was not going to lose that problem child, it was my dragon, screw anyone that thought they could touch what was mine. With a few steps back I bounced forward, with every step a platform was made until I was above the crowd and running along the wall where the magic grew from, the spikes not needing more than a moment's attention to form. The real problem came up fast as people pushed and shoved to get out the door. The door I was not getting through. Narrowing my eyes at the glass window above it, not very big, but head first was surely going to make it just right. So, when I neared, I leaped forward, the glass pulling away as I slid through only to reform behind me. My journey after was not properly thought through as I slammed right into the tree I even knew would be there. Grunting as I caught myself on a branch I pulled myself up and looked around. The thickest part of the crowd stood still by the entrance to the school. Frowning I climbed the tree higher and looked around, but found no large dragon. So, I summoned it. From high in the tree the circle actually glowed in the sky, much to my surprise, but I was already leaping free of the tree, knowing just where it'd be. Grunting at the hard glass I landed on I fixed my position, as its wings kept us in the sky. As I was adjusting the thing took one sniff of whatever was sending the student board into a frenzy, and it shot straight towards it. Crying out in surprise, I planted my hand behind myself, not used to being on this thing when it flew and also not properly seated. Diving it opened its wings with a roar I did not approve of, its claws digging into the dirt, as it decided this was where it was landing. Blowing my hair from my face I held my grimace, as it growled at a student it deemed to close, they fell back in shock as anyone would. With a tight hold on the dragon, I looked at just what the fuss was about. I stared in surprise, a more shocking gaze staring back. Dragon. The word fit, but it did not. That was definitely a large and scaled lizard, but it was standing on two legs and clothed, hugging its bag actually. Lilith Windsor. Screamed the vexing Fire Elite, and the lovely Miss H, who both seemed to be accompanying the dragon. Person. Why is it I've only been seeing 3 elites around here recently? Hey, Morin. Focus. I slid off the dragon, who snapped at a different student. Control your beast or I burn it. Shrieked the freak with fire, whose hands had already lit up in rage. Gosh, you really are sensitive, aren't you? Can't even control your magic properly. Look who's talking. Shut up. I doubt you could, the words had, unfortunately, fallen while I was distracted staring at the dark grey-scaled person. Lilith. Miss H snapped while he huffed and puffed, my attention still on the dragon. With a braided red wristband much like the one I wore. All right, girl. Miss H, not to be rude, but I don't see the problem. I'm confident to say you were being swarmed. Now, however, that doesn't seem to be the case. I shrugged, holding my elbow and motioning towards the hesitant crowd with my free hand. Isn't that a plus? Not when you're scaring more than the mob, she sighed, my eyes returning to the girl whose scales are more black than grey now. They changed. I'm positive that they changed. Is there a reason? Fear maybe. Well, my apologizes, you just seem to need help. I looked at the seething elite up and down as I said it, his deep breaths becoming shallower and glare harder. I'm not sure why, but I'm really into pissing him off. He makes the best faces. And thank you, but I think it'd be best if you maybe. She rolled her hands around each other while looking up, trying to find the words. Learned how to be a little more subtle. I raised both brows at that. Me? Subtle? That doesn't sound right. Wow, don't tell me you made some stupid grand entrance. Looking over my shoulder I found Adrian, who seemed completely unbothered despite having to have shoved his way through the crowd. Unless he did something similar to me, which wouldn't be shocking. It wasn't a grand entrance. So you did. Geez, you've scared the poor. He glanced at her wrist girl out of her scales. He looked at the glass dragon for a long moment before raising a brow. It bared its teeth at him only to falter at the utter lack of fear. Something to say, you overgrown window. It gave a weak growl and took a step back, wrapping its tail around me while I crossed my arms. So, Miss H, subtlety aside, would you like some help, or would you like me to go? Both are within my capabilities. I smiled, tilting my head and ignoring Adrian's snort. Cough, cough, hypocrite, cough, cough. My ignoring grew stronger while she looked between my dragon, me, Adrian, the girl, the fire elite, and the crowd. Sighing, she nodded. If you would. Chapter 21, is this just the default schedule? I asked blandly, the horrifying thing soul-sucking, but something I had grown used to seeing. For peculiar cases, she wavered, not even bothering to look me in the eyes while she said it, the undertone practically gut-punching me. All right, you know what? Whatever. I'm a freak, and even people of my magic apparently have issues with me. Okay, try to keep her out of trouble. Because I'm not the embodiment of trouble. Sure, sure. All right, so, show her around. I asked, leaning against my door frame with my arms and ankles crossed. I'd much appreciate it. And is it normal for people to enroll 3 months in, or is this one of those peculiar cases? I asked, a little more aggressively than I'd have liked, but I was growing less fond of that description. I was special. Different. Peculiar. But, well, so was she. I guess I've got someone to be different with. I didn't mean that as an insult. I've got to get to class, I cut her off, pushing off my door frame. Miss H was my favorite, because she was the nicest adult around, but she could occasionally cross lines. Not on purpose, but that doesn't change the fact that she did it. Grabbing my bag and crystals, I closed my door and walked past her. I'll look after her, but I'm not going to risk my grades or anything of the like just because you asked. Thank you. Sighing, I walked up to the next door and knocked while she left me to it. With more, louder, knocks, the door opened to a disheveled, dull, but multicolored girl with half her uniform on and what I would guess to be a panicked look. You don't have tails, was the first thing to come from her mouth. Blinking in surprise, I glanced down at her. Skirt? Long robe. The sight of her tail having the distress makes sense. Ah? The uniform slacks. Flipping my wrist, my band lit up and the usual white hue appeared. Thankfully, I had gotten up early. All right, we've got 20 minutes before we have to be at the canteen and 30 before class. I can make a quick fix, that'll work for now. Are you all right? She cried, her scales darkening, while I gurgled on my knees, holding my very much so bleeding face. Alex winced and apologized, but I just waved him off. Spitting blood from my mouth, I wiggled my jaw with my hand, pain radiating through my entire face. I slapped his arm lightly and he called for the professor. Lilith again. And I thought you'd actually make it through class today, she sighed, walking over and taking hold of my very broken jaw. I'd pair you with someone different, but you're a good match. Alex, how many hits did she get today? She asked, releasing me while my eyes teared up at her touch. 12, he counted on his fingers before giving her answer. And how many did you get? 2, humming. She stared down at me. You're getting better, Alex, stop pulling your punches, she won't break. She paused to stare at the broken jaw hanging from my face, prominently at least. I hate you all. Until then, get to the nurse. She glanced at the girl who was to watch today. Take that one with you. Can I take her? I hit her pretty hard. Alex trialed while she raised both brows. I noticed, she motioned to my face, which was bleeding and broken, and I was still standing here, when I could already be on my way to the medical wing. Do what you want, but you'll be getting a recovery class too. He nodded softly and helped me up. I'm so glad the uniforms are red. I really am sorry, he apologized again, while I slapped his chest with the back of my hand lightly, a shrug on my shoulders, drool on my chin, and tears on my cheeks. Everything hurts. Faces are out this season anyway. Cut it off. Cut it off right now. Is this normal? She asked softly, taking my other hand while the world spun with every step. It's not uncommon, but I think the only one that'd be able to call it normal is Lilith. He sighed while I didn't even try to talk, just gave a weak thumbs up. Rogues aren't really built for this kind of training, but it's not like the teachers ever do anything about it. That one got a shrug. She's a rogue. I had thought she was small, but I won't have guessed a rogue. I am being insulted to my face. Here I thought she liked me. Hey, whoa, Lilith, you aren't going to pass out, are you? Alex asked, straightening as I blinked, having apparently started to fall. Am I? I might. I'm starting to not feel my face. Or hands. Please don't pass out. Looking up at him, his green face twisting in worry and dread. I've never really bothered to look at him closely, have I? Were his tusks always this big? They are like as big as my pinky. Oh, stars. I am going to throw up. Lilith? Seriously, please don't pass out, and with that, I passed out. Chapter 22 Gar. Flinching up, I shivered and held my jaw, moving my tongue in my mouth. I pulled a face, as my mouth felt weird. I don't know, it was right, but a little to the left, and I don't mean that it was crooked, more of a, that seems right, but you may have moved everything in my house 2 inches to the left. I'm going to start giving you times where you can and can't be in here, James growled while I moved my jaw with my free hand. You already do that. I rolled my eyes, falling back on the stiff bed better than the boards in my room. Yeah, well, I'm going to. His threat dying off and glare coming in hard. Get out, humming. I pushed myself off the bed and rolled to my feet. With a lazy wave over my shoulder, I grabbed my bag and walked out. 2 very large people waiting for me. You know you'll have to do a recovery class for helping, right? I asked, looking the green boy up and down. The plump girl was now a similar green, though she had stripes of different colors and spots to match. She didn't have to worry about that as she was only following me around today, much like how I wandered around my first day. Yeah, that's what the professor said, he smiled sheepishly, rubbing the back of his head. Narrowing my eyes slightly, completely unwilling to do the same for him, I looked him over once more from behind. The girl bigger than myself, but a little shorter than him. Unless horns count for height. Then she was taller. Is there a problem with recovery classes? She asked, the words causing me physical pain as I leaped away from her hissing. She stared, startled, while Alex pulled me away from her by the top of my head and a little of my face. Cause his hands are the size of freaking melons. Well, let's just say what you saw us doing in class is easily considered child's play compared to a recovery class. You at least work with other students in class, he mumbled the last part before his shoulders sagged. Okay, I may regret this, as you should. Why would you ever do it voluntarily? I shivered at the thought. I'd much rather put a dagger through my chest than volunteer to do one. I felt bad. I didn't mean to hit you that hard. He groaned with his head falling into his hands. I may not remember everything clearly, other than searing agony in my face area, but I'm almost sure you were told not to pull your punches. I raised a brow, brushing off my trousers and crossing my arms. Do you really want that? You will do no such thing. All 3 of us looked to the head healer's office while he frantically shook his hand, his arms flying around dramatically, and me quickly standing in front of the window on his door with my hands on my hips and a grin on my lips. Not at all, but you forget our slogan here at Dragon Valley, I said extra pleasantly, not wanting to get beat more than I already do, but also currently costing him in his own education. Work towards your goal, he sighed, now only with one hand on his face, even if comes at the cost of others. Try it. It'll be more beneficial. I grunted, struggling to keep the door shut, as he desperately tried to get out and stop what I was doing. We should go, I strained with a smile, the both of them looking from me to each other. Just so you know, I hate that slogan, he gave me a pointed look, crossing his arms and walking away. She followed him, fiddling with her fingers and looking at me worried. Glass now covering the door frame, I rushed after them, looking over my shoulder, his shouting quieter. Well, hate or not, the whole help someone get punished thing just goes to show their priorities, so just don't swim against the current. I shrugged, wiping my hands free of the scolding. You say a lot of things that'd suggest you don't like the school. He changed the subject, looking down at me while I didn't even look at him. Yeah, well, it isn't like they're hinting to the fact they are brainwashing children to do their bidding with soul-sucking and both mentally and physically exhaust us until we are nothing but golems interested in whatever goals they decided to feed us when the time comes. I hummed blandly, digging through my bag for my crystals as I take them off for my physical classes. Woo, that's depressing, he whistled, seemingly having no other response. He wasn't shocked nor surprised. So that means he had come up with a similar theory. So I really wasn't the only one, huh? Which means we really are just not talking about it. Life is depressing, I shot without missing a beat. This time, he looked back down at me. It only is if you make it. Narrowing my eyes at him, I turned my attention to Aranori, who had been silent during our little firing match. Well, you'll get to see later today just how bad recovery classes are, because I'm probably going to have to do at least 2, so that's fun. The video may have ended, but Lilith's story is far from over. Subscribe to our channel to follow every twist and turn and unravel the next magical mystery. Don't miss a single episode, the truth is about to be revealed.